Hey everyone, so I wanted to talk to you today about having realistic goals on your instrument. I think most of us can say, although you may be new, that one stage or other we've spread ourselves too thin. We've created a practice schedule that's had too many things on it to practice, and even after a month, you don't really feel that you've made any progress in any of it because your attention is just all over the place. Uh, Even now in the age of YouTube and I guess books have always been available, but maybe even more books available than before. But I'd say YouTube being the worst culprit. That you can go on there and there's God knows how many videos on suggesting what to practice, how to practice, and if you were to spend the rest of your life, you probably wouldn't be able to cover it all. And that can become very demoralizing in a way because you think, well, geez, how can I ever get good at the piano when I've got a job, I've got kids, I've got commitments? It's impossible. I can never do all of that. And that's when a realization hit me, as simple as it sounds, in that what we really need to do is pick a couple or three or four things that we want to get good at and just focus in on those things. And I'd say it's always important to pick more than one thing, because if you just stick with one thing, depending on your ability to focus, you may get sick of it very quickly and just stop playing altogether. So depending on the time you have available, pick 2, 3, 4 things that you want to get good at and focus in on them. If you feel that you could just practice 2 things and still get enjoyment out of it, as in not getting bored or your concentration wandering off, then in some ways that's kind of even better, because in my mindset, if you're practicing consistently a few things every single day, then your focus is going to go into those things and you're going to improve much faster than if you're trying to practice 8 things a day or even more. But it does depend on how much time you have available. If, for example, you have around 25 minutes a day available, you could say, well, I'm going to use 15 minutes of that to practice a piece, and I'm going to use 10 minutes of that to practice scales. And in my mind, that's pretty good, because 15 minutes is kind of enough time to settle in and work on a piece. And as is the 10 minutes, quite plentiful to practice scales. Perhaps you could split that in half, the 10 minutes, and work on a third thing as well. But you have to remember that the more you spread your attention and practice, to some degree, the more time it's going to take you to achieve your goals within what you're practicing. And it can be argued in some ways that even if you practice something for 5 days in a row, you might not notice change, but yet in 5 days after that, you'll begin to notice the change. So you may not necessarily, the change result for your work is almost delayed, depending. So you may find that you've got, I don't know, say 6 things that you want to work on, and you almost alternate them every other day. So one day you work on a piece and you work on scales. The next day you work on a piece and you work on arpeggios. And the problem is with practice is that the skill in learning your instrument is a skill in mastering your ability to practice and how you construct your practice sessions. For me personally, I know that if I say, right, I'm going to do one piece today, another piece tomorrow, on one day with a piece I'll do scales, another day I'll do arpeggios, and maybe loop that, say, so a different piece each day alternating. So you're doing 2 pieces but alternating, and you're alternating skills. I'd say that's not too bad, but for me personally, I'm going to probably need to work a bit harder on that one piece and focus in on it. So I'll be spreading myself thin, and especially in the time that I have available. If I had an hour available a day, which we all like to say, yeah, I've got an hour available a day and I'll do it every day, then I would say I'll practice 2 pieces a day. I'll practice some scales. You can add more of what you're going to practice. But if you've only got 25 minutes, in my mind, it's quite a small window, and you want to give yourself enough time to settle into what you're practicing, and and not spread yourself thin. Spreading yourself thin is, I guess, my main message in all of this, because just in the past I've realized that it just doesn't work. So if you're a genius and you can spend 5 minutes on a piece, on 5 pieces each day, then and that works for you, then you should do that. So take everything with what I'm saying with a pinch of salt, but kind of use it to question what you're doing and how you're doing it, because we all love seeing improvement in what we do, and if you're doing something consistently, you're going to improve much faster. Well, or hopefully you will, if you're doing it the right way. So yeah, and another thing about these goals is that you have to be consistent, with your practice. There's going to be days where you don't feel like practicing. Maybe you're tired, maybe you just lost interest, you can't be bothered, whatever reason, you've had a hard day at work. But when you show up and sit at your piano, sit at your guitar, with your sax, anything, the fact that you're sitting there means you're winning, because you showed up no matter how you feel. And I'm sure, depending on how long you've been playing, there are a lot of you at some time or not have experienced sitting down when you hadn't feel like it, or even with anything really, doing anything when you haven't really felt like doing it, and you've had more fun than you would if you were really up for doing it. So it's always worth showing up, even if you don't feel like it. I mean, yeah, you 99% of the time you'll be so happy you did after, and even if you feel as miserable when you finished as when you started, then at least you showed up. You got that one out the bag, because it was in there in you and you had to get it out. But my little caveat to that is that if you, over a week or 2 weeks, every time you sit at the piano, or 80% of the time, I keep saying piano because that's my main instrument, but 80% of the time you sit at your instrument to practice, if you feel miserable, then you need to step back, even if for a few days or a week or whatever, and just assess what you're doing and think, do I really enjoy this? Do I is the end goal something that I'm interested in? Is it really for me? And perhaps more important than anything, assess the way you're practicing, because if you took a scale, you can play up and down a keyboard quite mindlessly once you've learned the scale, and you can almost go to sleep and daydream. And in my mind, that's almost the worst type of practice. I know muscle memory comes into play with a lot of things, like a boogie woogie, say, like if you're improving your speed. To some degree, it is kind of monotonous in practicing it, but at the same token, there is ways to practice scales or bass lines or whatever that make it engaging and interesting and help keep your focus on it. Because as long as your focus is on it, then you're going to increase the rate that you learn it, because you're taking it in, whereas just doing it mindless. I managed to completely knock myself off track doing this, but yeah, the main thing, when we're assessing your practice session, just be very careful how you're practicing, and again with YouTube, go and search for ways on how to practice certain things, and you'll hopefully get loads of ideas of different ways to do so. Because even though it's hard work practice, it doesn't mean that it has to be boring or frustrating or unenjoyable. Most things you can manipulate so that they're to an extent fun, enjoyable, not too difficult, yet still challenging, engaging, but not too mind-numbing. And that's the dance that you have to have with yourself. No one can tell you personally the best way to do it. There might be some people who literally can do things quite monotonously and they improve greatly. And maybe anyone would in the end, but most people, they need a bit of feeling connect, a bit of joy connect, that they need something to connect them to what they're doing. Otherwise, they're not really going to reach their potential. And I suppose that is everything I wanted to say on the subject. So good luck in your journey, and don't be too hard on yourself. Keep those goals small and you'll achieve them and you'll feel happy. Don't be overwhelmed with the amount of things to learn, because you're always going to have things to learn. So pick little targets, record your progress, quite literally, because recording at the start and the end of what you're learning, you'll notice a difference. And keep going. And always remember that an instrument is there for playing, to play, to have fun, to enjoy, and ultimately always strive to do that. Thanks.